El Nino is forming and what it could mean for Europe as we get deeper into summer and the upcoming winter. Thank you for joining me on Mr. Weatherman Europe. I'm meteorologist Brian Shields. It's the 20th of February, 2026. It is a Friday. Now, El Nino, the signs of that are the warming in the eastern Pacific. It is amazing how something in one location could impact so many areas. And this is such a significant area of warming that we're going to see. That means we're going to be in an El Nino cycle, which changes some of the conditions overall, kind of on a broader scale, right? So what happens over here is going to impact what happens, or at least influences what happens in Europe once this El Nino cranks in. The first thing we see with the warming in the Pacific, you get this southern jet. So I bring this up. This is back toward parts of Mexico, the southern U.S., a southern jet in this. There's a lot of severe weather, but this is a shift. Things kind of shift over here, so then they shift in parts of Europe. So almost all of us get at least some changes as far as be it in an El Nino or a La Nina cycle or a neutral cycle, which is in between. Now, this is a different chart. Don't always show you this. The blue is La Nina. That's where we are now. We're kind of coming out of that. And then the reds are the percentages or chances of an El Nino forming, and we're already seeing the signals of it, and that's why those percentages, the chance of an El Nino forming is rather high. These are the months, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So later in summer and then into winter, a higher likelihood that will be under the influence across Europe and across the world as a whole, under the influence of El Nino. So what does it mean? Now, one of the things we look at is where it will be wetter, where it will be drier, hotter, cooler, all of that. One of the things we watch out, of course, the crops, things like that, very important. This is a crop yield index, if you will, for a forecast for El Nino year. Some of the impacts we see across parts of Central America and the Caribbean. Drier than usual, producing a lower yield, which is always a concern, kind of that negative yield. Back through Europe, what we can expect, some of us benefit from this, right? Look at Italy in the purples, for example, just one spot I'm picking in the purples. Depending on the crop, there can be some benefits to this. Overall, generally neutral as far as thinking about crops are concerned once we get into that El Nino cycle. So what we can expect as a whole, the influence of El Nino across Europe. Well, in the winter, it is usually milder and wetter, especially across northern sections. The entirety of Europe is generally milder, a little bit above average, still the winter time, so still cold, but fewer of those really cold spells that will be around. Southern sections are a concern because it is drier, not only in the winter, but also in the summer. That could lend itself to some significant droughts. So watching out for that drought risk. We'll be watching that potentially building late summer into winter. Summer itself, hotter and drier overall, which of course will lend itself to some heat waves, some significant heating at times, higher temperatures, and watching out for those drought conditions, not just in the winter, but also in the summer. Winter, it's really confined to southern locations, but summer, it could be many locations. So it could be a really hot end of this upcoming summer, and depending on how long El Nino lasts, usually about 9 to 12 months. La Ninas, by the way, last longer. They can last a few years. El Nino should start later this summer, through the winter into next summer, just to kind of give you a feel of how long we'll be under that influence. Now, back to our big pattern change we have seen across Europe as promised. Back through Portugal, Spain, for example, a whole lot drier. Now, the last several weeks, we've had that strong jet, the storm track to the south, causing the kind of historic rain, the damage, so unfortunate in so many locations. But that storm track has shifted to the north. Not much of a change, though, Ireland and the UK, because a couple weeks ago, as I mentioned, there was that little branch of the jet that lifted up to the north. So the main storm track has lifted up to the north, but there's already been a piece of that in place. So a lot of us are going to experience the changes, but not quite all of us. Ireland and the UK, for example, a spot that has been wet and should still be generally wetter than average. Let me start big picture and then zoom around to some problem areas. I'll do that in just a second. Of course, we've had the severe weather pulling back through Southeast Europe, and been watching that from this morning through the afternoon. We've been watching over toward the Balkans, watching out for some of the rain, snow, but this is more of that northern storm track, right? Look at Portugal, for example, on the drier side. Meanwhile, Norway, more of a significant rain and snow. Germany, Poland, just a few spots naming here. I'll zoom down in a moment. Better chance of rain. And then we'll be watching more systems kind of working in Monday and Tuesday. But instead of just driving directly into Spain and Portugal, aside from the tail end of things, more of this energy is lifting up toward the north. That's where the main storm track has gone. But again, still the concerns for tonight in this area. Hungary, south, Romania, rain, snow. South through Greece could see some thunderstorms. Severe weather potential. Watching out for the flooding. I was highlighting that in the previous videos. Had us covered here. I know I'm blocking Portugal and Spain. Actually kind of a nice thing that we're quieter. Not as much Italy, France. This is on Sunday. Czechia over towards Slovakia, Austria, Slovenia. Watching out for some of that rain at times. With the storm track lifting to the north, we're going to be milder in many locations. You see kind of the lack of not only precipitation for the most part, but snow in particular. Belgium, for example, on Monday, looking at some of the rain. Same thing, the Netherlands, Germany, seeing some of that rain that will be around. To the north, as we work our way into tonight, Sweden, Norway, watching out for the rain and snow, keeping an eye on that. Denmark, mainly that rain moving by. Could be heavy at times, keeping an eye on Denmark as this pulls over toward Poland with some rain and snow. There's the next shot of rain moving in on our Saturday. Ireland and the UK just kind of sweeping in. Here's Iceland, as I showed earlier, and then this lifts its way back toward Norway and Sweden again with additional rain and snow. But there's the rain. Poland, Czechia, Austria, back through Belgium, Germany, the Netherlands, mainly rain. On Monday, showery weather will be around for many locations on this map. And then we'll keep an eye on the next area that pivots in. Could clip Scotland with some heavier rain. And once again, with that new pattern from Ireland back toward Norway, more of that rain that will be around. So we get to the north side of all of this. Here's Finland, Estonia, Russia, just to orient you, Belarus, Latvia, Lithuania, Ukraine, just naming a few locations. You see, here's Iceland. Here's that rain as we work our way into our Saturday. And you see how this kind of pivots around. I mentioned Denmark could see some heavier rain, even snow at times on Sunday. And then this is that snow that I'll show you the totals in a moment. Parts of Norway, not as much still in Finland. Poland, there's the rain. Ukraine, Belarus, some of that rain. Snow showers, Sweden, Finland, but more of that action back toward Norway on Monday. And here comes that next area lifting through and bringing additional rain and snow to some locations. There's some of that snow. Belarus, Ukraine, still dealing with that. So the storm track has changed and now it's getting locked in. This new pattern is starting to get locked in, which means some spots, not a lot of rain, not a lot of snow. Here are the snow totals, the potential of some of that snow as we go forward. Let me put on a couple numbers on this. Here's Italy, for example, and you see right in through here, not as high as we've seen. Again, a lack of precipitation and milder than average. So as we swing over the next 6 to 7 days, that's this snow outlook, 30 to 40 centimeters as a peak, as a high, as we get back through the Alps. We swing back here. Here's Norway, for example, just to give you a feel. You could see some of these totals anywhere from 30 to 50 centimeters over about the next week. All of that energy moving in. So we're going to have some of those higher snow totals that will be around. Rain, of course, dealing with that. Most spots, 25 to 50 millimeters of rain. With the showery weather around, even when we get heavier rain, it shouldn't last too terribly long for the most part. So we shouldn't see generally flash flooding in most spots, but we could see some flooding just because we've seen so much rain as a whole. Southern sections, as I mentioned, drier. Italy, Sardinia, over toward Malta, Corsica, just naming a few spots. You get back toward Venice on the edge of some stuff, but for the most part, this storm track has really changed. This includes some of which is going to be tonight with some of that rain around. Here's Turkey and Cyprus, Romania, and get back toward Belarus, so watching out for some of the additional rain. Again, some of this could be heavier. Bulgaria, we could watch out for some heavier weather as we work our way into tonight, even early on Saturday. And then this here, of course, this is snow as well, but this is if everything were to be rain, just to give you a feel. But we covered both the rain and the snow total. So El Nino returning late in the summer. Overall, that means a milder pattern and then a really hotter pattern, especially as we work our way deeper into summer, and then the following summer as well. Drier in southern Europe, and that includes the winter time. So we'll have to really closely monitor the storm tracks and the drought conditions. Amazing to talk about that, right? Especially coming off of this winter in which we've had historic floods in spots. Next winter, we may be talking about historic levels of drought. We'll see how it all shakes out. So thank you for taking the time to subscribe to Mr. Weatherman Europe. I hope you're doing well. Have a good weekend ahead.